All righty. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is our third episode here of the Tranquilo Wellness Talks with AMS. Say what's up. Let the people,
Hey
whatever you got to
guys,
say.
how's it going? I'm excited to
Awesome.
be back. Can't believe we're on is this our third?
Technically third. Remember, we had the kind of the technical difficult. Had technical difficulties pretty much on every single one we've recorded so far.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Well, I can't believe this is our
the
third.
first one we kind of split into two because of the first one's like more of like an intro to you, and then
Right, right, right.
uh, uh, the second one we got into a little bit about yoga.
Yeah.
Vinyasa. Some of the benefits of yoga, just high level on the surface. So if for whatever reason this is your first one that you've listened to, go back, take a listen to at least the one with the yoga. If you want to, give them a little bit of high level background again, if anyone's new. I know you got your master's in some sort of holistic nutrition. So if you want to just high level touch on that a
Yeah.
little bit before we
Y-
get into the topic for today.
Yeah, sure. If this is your first time listening to an episode with me, then welcome. Yeah, I'm a health coach. I got certified as a holistic health coach, and got a master's in holistic nutrition, and I am also a certified Power Vinyasa yoga instructor. So I'm kind of here to kind of lead this wellness effort and talk about everything health and wellness, and always taking that holistic approach.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today, again, we're going to get into a lot of different topics, and I think this is a great kind of segue into a lot of the conversations that we're going to have. But today's topic is going to be around the gut-mind connection. So obviously, she's the pro, not me. Obviously, I've done a little bit of research. I like to read on these things for my own personal knowledge and usage. But today, like kind of like how we talked about before, she's going to be teacher. I'm going to be student, so I'm going to be asking honest questions, trying to really, really understand, what this connection is between the gut and the mind. Right. So we'll get into a little bit. So, before we really get into the technical aspect of it, can you get into a little bit about what this connection is between the gut and the mind? Obviously, our body is kind of like this vessel for us, right?
Hmm.
So it's very important that we take care of not only our mind, but the physical components of our body. So if you could touch on what this connection is between the gut and the brain.
Yeah. And also like something that I kind of want to really highlight here is like, you said like I'm the pro here, but I also feel like hopefully by the end of this, at the end, kind of like everyone feels like they're a pro of their
Yes,
own,
love that.
mind gut
Hmm.
connection. But yeah, I would say I always try to think of this as how would I explain this to like a little kid, right? Because this can be a very complex topic, but I do want to keep it maybe as simple and no like pun intended, but digestible as possible. Um, so I would explain it by saying that the gut brain connection, one, the most important thing is that you acknowledge that there is a connection. So if you think about when you get excited about something, when you feel nervous about something, when you feel anxious about something, you feel all of that
Yeah,
in your gut, right? The butterflies, and this could be in both positive and negative situations. You can feel a happy emotion, you can feel a negative emotion, and all of that is felt in the gut. And that is because there is this gut brain axis, which I would just explain as a communication network where the gut and the brain are consistently and constantly communicating with each other. And what happens to you in your brain will affect the gut, and what happens in your gut will affect the brain. It's a
right.
little hard to tell if it's one that has more influence on the other. So by that I mean if you're someone that experienced gut issues and you also experience anxiety, it's kind of
Hmm.
hard to tell like which one came first. Like, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the gut issues or is it the anxiety? Because they
Got it.
both have such a strong influence on each other. There's really not enough like research to accurately say this was the initial cause. But I mean, that's how would I explain it? There's a communication network, the gut brain axis, where the brain and the gut are constantly communicating to each other. And what you do for
Yeah.
one will impact the other.
And it's funny because during the pandemic, I never really had anxiety. I don't have, I'm not like a person that has anxiety or diagnosed with it.
Hmm.
Never really had even felt those sensations. But during the pandemic, after being cooped up inside for so long, I started kind of feeling like a little antsy, right?
Yeah.
And one of the symptoms that I started getting was I started getting super gassy and burping a lot. And
Yeah.
it was like, what the hell is going on? My diet didn't really change. My exercise didn't really change. Everything was pretty much the same. The only thing that, changed was the effects of the pandemic from a social standpoint. And I remember, talking to my doctor virtually and saying like, hey, I'm having these like just burping a lot. Like I just be walking in the house and just massive burps, being like, "What the hell is this?" Out of nowhere. And then I ended up seeing a gastro doctor. He told
Hmm.
me that it's probably like an anxiety thing.
Hmm.
It's common in these situations, and sometimes you carry some of that anxiety, and it's a form of release of energy. There's
Yeah.
times even when I've meditated and I come out of a meditation burping like crazy, and it's like
Oh, that's wild.
it's
It's like a release.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
release. It's
That's
crazy.
crazy. And it's interesting because you said that you went to a gastroenterologist.
Hmm.
I think that's really cool that your gastroenterologist can make that connection for you of like, hey, it's a really crazy time. We're
Yeah.
all cooped up. There's a lot of uncertainty. And that he could say, like, it could be this because there has been this new field of, there's new doctors that are specific in neurogastroenterology.
Oh
So it's
wow.
basically the study of the connection between the gut and the mind. Whereas gastroenterologists their specific focus is like anything that has to do with like the stomach, any sort of part of your body, any organ that has to do with nutrient absorption, digestion, etc. But this new field of neurogastroenterology specifically focuses on the impact that your brain and your mind has on the gut and vice versa, which I think is really cool to be able to go to a doctor, especially if you're a person who's like, I'm experiencing all these gut issues, but nothing in my life has changed as far as diet, exercise, but
Yeah.
I'm experiencing a lot of stress. So I think that's really cool that there's a doctor that you can go to that can help you realize what you're experiencing on an emotional level is affecting the way that your gut works. And I mean, I can kind of like get into like what's happening in your body
Yeah.
when
I
you
mean,
do
I
experience.
I think my at least my next question would
Hmm.
be, obviously there's a connection between the gut and the brain, and I think you were kind of going to get
Yeah.
into it, but what is it exactly that's going on in our gut that brain really kind of, I guess, feels inclined to have that communication with the gut?
Yeah. So I feel like there's a few like back, uh, just kind of like some context before I kind of explain what it is. But
Okay.
two of the most important things to kind of keep in mind when you're referring to your gut are microbes and then your gut microbiome. And I'm
Okay.
going to keep this like simple because I'm even the type of person where like any sort of scientific term really intimidates me. Um, but a microbe is basically just a microorganism. So it's any sort of living organism. They're all around us. They're not just in our body, they're in the water, in the air, everywhere.
Right.
And we have millions and millions of them in our body, and we have one specifically in our gut. So microbes, again, just really tiny microscopic organisms like bacteria, fungi, viruses, etc. And there are good ones, but then there are also ones that are essential for our health. And so
Okay.
we have like a whole ecosystem in our gut. And that's when we refer to the microbiome. So a microbiome is basically just a collection of a collection of these microbes, but within a specific environment. And
Got it.
so when I refer to like the microbiome, the gut microbiome, excuse me, I'm specifically referring to all these living organisms that we have specifically in our gut. And
Got it.
these microbes regulate brain function and they kind of send off signals to the rest of our bodies, right? So that's kind of like the context that I wanted to give you. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Yes. Definitely
Okay,
does.
cool. I definitely feel like I need like a blackboard to like write all of this out and really embrace the
It's not.
teaching aspect.
I was going to say it's not a bad idea. I don't hate that.
I know I'm a very
I,
visual
I,
person,
I'm
so I like,
I'm almost like inclined to really. I'm about to like get a notebook and just really start taking notes and stuff like that.
you can listen afterwards. And like to those of you listening, you can press pause, take your notes. There's a
Hell
pop
yeah.
quiz at the end. No, I'm kidding. Um, so when we talk about stress, right, we have like acute stress and we have chronic stress. So acute stress also isn't a bad thing, right? Because it can be like you're nervous that you're about to give a speech in front of a lot of people, or even like, you're going on a first date and you feel nervous before, or like you see someone you like their name pops up in your phone, like that kind of sends that butterfly feeling to your stomach. That's acute
Definitely.
stress. You don't experience it for a very long time. It's very temporary. The thing that you're anxious about, those feelings go away the second it's over, right? So when you're done giving the speech, those anxious feelings go away.
Okay.
After you go on the date, those anxious feelings go
Right.
away. So think of this acute stress as like temporary. What's happening is on a physiological level. So in your body, the blood flow to your gut changes. Your gut starts to contract a lot more. And that's why maybe you'll feel urges to like go to the bathroom. Or again, like maybe like an excess of gas, like those
Right.
things are what's happening, right? But again, when you're experiencing acute stress, that doesn't happen. Like the symptoms will go away. And so it's really not that bad for you. At the end of the day, experiencing that kind of stress is normal. Chronic stress, so when you're experiencing it all the time and almost to the point where it's so normal to you to feel stress that you may not even recognize it as stress anymore,
Yeah.
exaggerates all of those symptoms. So the contractions that are happening in your gut, the blood flow that's changing. And what happens is it causes those microbes, so the microorganisms living in your gut, to send different signals to the brain, which unfortunately is only creating this vicious cycle of anxiety, right?
Wow.
So it could be that anxiety, in this case, caused all of these things to happen in your gut. You're feeling a lot of contractions. It's changing your digestion. It's ruining your ability to absorb nutrients properly. And as a result, these microbes in your gut are now sending different signals to the brain. And so it's throwing off the regulation in your body. And then that's just prolonging or even just exaggerating the feelings of anxiety.
Right.
It's like this really vicious cycle. But on a
Do you,
physiological level, you are changing.
got it. And do you think that a lot of what causes chronic stress, right? Because I mean, for the sake of this conversation,
Hmm.
I guess your gut can cause you to feel anxiety based off maybe some of the foods that you're eating, but then there's
Yeah.
also the reverse effect where it's like you're feeling something in your stomach because you're feeling stress from something, right?
Yeah.
So can a lot of acute stressful moments trigger a chronic stress situation in the body over time?
I think that it definitely depends what the acute stress is. I think,
Hmm.
for example, let's say that it could be something in your relationship or something at work
Right.
that causes an acute stress, right? But then you don't really deal with it, or maybe it's something that, because again, acute stress is something that's temporary, right? So it stresses
Right.
you out in a moment, but then the situation changes and therefore you're not stressed anymore. It could be that then a certain thing in your relationship or a certain thing at work it doesn't change, and so now it is causing chronic
True.
stress.
Hmm.
Um, and you said something like with the diet too, which I think is
Right.
interesting because something that I also kind of think of as far as simplifying things is you kind of have to view yourself as like the host of your microbes, right? And
Okay.
so the healthier you are, the healthier your microbes are. And how do you make yourself healthier? Feeding yourself well. And so that's why, if you think about it that way, right? If your food impacts your microbes and your microbes impacts your, like the way that it connects to your brain, then your food also can directly impact your mental health, which I think is something that it's not really talked about when you talk about mental health, right? No one's like,
Yeah, that's wild.
change your diet and you might feel better mentally. But it's a
Hmm.
really important part about dealing with mental health.
And I guess, what would be some of those foods that we should be eating that ultimately help, I guess, healthy microbes in the body? What are
Hmm.
some of the foods? Obviously, here, vegetables are obviously important, fruits are important, but specifically, what are some of the foods that we should be eating that ultimately enhance our mental and physical capabilities?
Yeah, so it's interesting because obviously, something else that I forgot to mention with the gut microbiome
Mhm.
is that everyone's gut microbiome is really, really unique, right? So like mine's going to be different than yours, and yours is going to be different than the next
Okay.
person. So, and also this way that we eat is going to be different. But I would say the two foundations that I would really, really focus on are one, limiting ultra processed foods. Um,
Okay.
if you want to think about what is an ultra processed food,
Yeah.
it's
Give us an example.
basically like taking components of food and processing it into something that's like maybe someone 100 or 200 years ago would have been like, what is that? Right? Like not even
Gotcha.
recognize it as food. To a certain extent, like a certain level of processing is always going to be involved in certain things, right? Like you take a
Mhm.
protein powder, even if it's like a vegan, no sugar, healthy protein powder, it's still processed, right? It like
Yeah,
broke down all these plants and made a protein powder, right? So
of
I
course.
would consider that a processed food. An ultra processed food would be like a Coca-Cola, this pains me to say, a donut. Um, like it's taking, or just any weird packaged thing that you see at the grocery store.
Yeah,
I'm not like referring to like a tortilla chip. I would say that that's processed. I wouldn't say it's ultra processed. I mean, that's
got
just
it.
like broken down corn.
They
Um,
say like staying away, like anything that's, in the frozen food section too, because like that ultimately has probably been like processed at some capacity that, there's only one way that it could stay frozen in a cooked already for such a long amount of time. And, it might be very high in sodium or it might be very high in cholesterol. I don't know exactly, but I've heard that before. It's where it's like, go pick your foods and go to where everything is like whole and natural, right? Like go to the
yes,
produce section, go in those. Don't walk. They say walk through the outside of the aisle. When you start
the
walking in the
perimeter.
end, yeah, exactly. When you start walking in the inside of the aisles, that's where all the bad stuff is.
Yeah, so think of it as like walking the perimeters, even like visualize your grocery store. No
Right.
matter which grocery store you go to, the perimeter of the grocery store is always produce,
Hmm.
dairy, eggs, meat, fish, and then like oils. You'll notice that like olive oils and all that stuff and grains, the closer you get to the center of the grocery store is usually what? Baking products. So things like you'll notice that at the very, very center of the aisles, even within the aisles, there's like a hierarchy. Because on the
Yeah.
outside of the aisles, you'll have things like canned foods, oils, dressing,
Hmm.
not bad. Then the closer you get at the very center are things like, uh, flour, sugar, things that you use to bake. So that's a good tip is the
Okay.
bulk of your groceries should come from the perimeters of the grocery store. And that was going to lead me to kind of like what you should be including, right? So you know that you should be excluding ultra processed foods because we
Hmm.
haven't evolved enough yet as a species to be even able to absorb ultra processed foods. Our bodies haven't evolved as quickly as the food industry has. So our bodies don't really recognize ultra processed foods. What they do recognize are plant based foods and things like chicken, steak, fish. Um, when I say plant based, I don't mean that you should be vegan. I just mean that there should be a heavy emphasis on plants in your diet,
Yeah.
and a wide variety of that as well. Again, everyone's different. We're not all going to like the same vegetables or the same fruits, but the best effort that you can make in trying to keep it as diverse as possible is going to make your gut microbiome diverse. And that's really important for gut health is diversity. So plant-based foods, so vegetables, fruits.
Hmm.
Um, and then another thing I was going to say are like probiotics and prebiotics, which you can find in food,
Okay.
or you can do it in a supplement form.
Right. Yeah. I've
Mhm.
taken a probiotic in yeah, in a pill or supplement format.
Yeah.
And that was actually something that when I was having that gas that they actually had told me to take. They're like, hey, get on a probiotic for 30 days and it should help.
Yeah, it's definitely really important. Something that I know, again, I almost like hesitant to say this because I don't want to like make anyone feel like, oh man, I'm not doing it well enough. But there's also like not every probiotic is the same. So I would say that I would just encourage people to read the label because a lot of times they'll put a lot of fillers in those things if you're taking it in a capsule form at least.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times, depending on the probiotic, it won't even actually make it to your gut because all the acid in your stomach will attack the capsule. So that by the time it actually gets to your stomach, the capsule has been destroyed and the bacteria in the probiotic didn't even make it to your gut. So just being mindful of that. But at the end of the day, it's still, you're still doing something good for your stomach. So I wouldn't stress about it too bad, especially since you know that
Okay.
stressing causes gut problems.
Exactly. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is make your diet a stressful situation where now you're ultimately uh, kind of diminishing the returns that you're trying to get out of eating a good,
Yeah.
a good meal. But what is like from morning to nighttime? What is an example of I guess what's the word? Not a recipe, but a menu look like for someone like yourself that knows about this and is conscious about really taking care of the gut and eating the right foods.
Yeah. So I'll say that there's two things, and I'll talk about like the foods and kind of ways that you can include more of the things that you need. And then there's
Okay.
also like the whole lifestyle component, and even the way that you are eating has a huge impact um, on your digestion, and your anxiety and stress is what impacts the way that you eat. But I digress. I'll start with
Yes,
food.
I could
So
definitely resonate with that.
yeah, so I'll start. So, breakfast, I think it's really important to start with proteins and fats. Proteins being eggs, fats being like
Mhm.
avocado, olive oil, those are all healthy fats. And by including vegetables in that, what you could do is, for example, I always like to add vegetables to my omelets. So, omelets, I'm getting the protein. I use olive oil to get the healthy fat, and you can also use something like ghee, which is clarified butter. And I'll add like tomatoes, onions, and like spinach in my omelet, right? So I'm
Got it.
getting fiber from the vegetables and I'm getting the protein and fat in the way that I make the omelet. Um, if you are going to make something like a smoothie to get fruits in, then I would always put an emphasis on adding something like an avocado to your smoothie or almond butter, peanut butter, and then a protein powder so that you're still getting the fiber from the fruits, but then you're getting the protein from if you use a protein powder, and then
Right.
fats by adding like almond butter, peanut butter, those types of things.
Okay.
And then for the last two meals, this is the way that I always say that you should use a reference for building a plate, but again, adjusting it according to what you like and what you need on any given day. And so imagine that your plate were divided into three components. A third of it is protein, a third of it is a starchy vegetable or a grain. So that could be rice, it could be sweet potatoes. And then a third is a green vegetable. And by what you add lastly is 1 to 3 tablespoons of a healthy fat. So that could be, again, you add an avocado to your meal, you drizzle olive oil over it. Most like healthy dressings that don't have added sugar are a great source of healthy fats because they're based in
Yeah.
either olive oil or avocado oil, something like that. But really prioritizing all three of what are the macronutrients. So it's protein,
Of
fats,
course.
and carbs.
Hmm.
That's ensuring that you're getting plants in every meal. And it's also putting an emphasis on protein, which is also important for digestion.
Okay.
So that's how I would think of it. A third protein, an animal protein if you're not vegan. If you're vegan, then a plant-based protein. A third green vegetables, a third a starchy vegetable or grain.
Got it.
If it's not perfectly even every time you eat, that's fine. If your body's asking you for more protein on a certain day, go for it. Your
Yeah.
body is wise, it knows what it's talking about. So,
Okay.
food wise, that's the best way to structure how you're eating in
Got
order
it.
to get the best possible support for your gut.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to get, personally, I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
you read up like on eggs, right? They say like, yeah, eggs are good, but eggs are high in cholesterol. Should you be eating a lot of eggs? Is that something that you can eat daily? If so, do you eat egg whites? Can you eat eggs with the yolk? What's kind of like the general consensus? Because goddamn, you read so much different
I
things.
know. It's so frustrating. And you're going to hate my answer because it's not a straight answer.
Okay. That's fine.
Just kind of goes back to the fact that everyone is different.
Okay.
Listen, to not get too scientific, there's three different types of fats, right? The one that you should absolutely never eat or try your best not to are trans fats.
Okay.
Um, so let's exclude that. Saturated and unsaturated are two
Right.
fats, right? The best one for you are unsaturated fats, which are things like salmon, olive oil, avocados, walnuts.
Got it.
Those things are like the best possible fats for you. Saturated fats are found in animal products. So that's where the eggs come in, right? And the reason why there's such a heated debate on saturated fats is because there's two types of cholesterol. There's one that's good and there's one that's bad. And
Yeah.
obviously, the one that obviously everyone's worried about is the one that's bad for you.
Of course.
Saturated fats raise your good cholesterol levels, but they also have the bad cholesterol levels. So to answer your question, it depends on what your cholesterol levels are. If you are someone, and here's the thing, cholesterol is not just about diet, it also could be something hereditary. I know that in my family there's high
Yeah.
cholesterol, and so I'm super
Definitely.
mindful of the amount of, again, saturated fats are found in all animal products. So anything that is meat, dairy, eggs, and then coconut oil and palm oil. So if you are someone that has high cholesterol or you're prone to having higher cholesterol, I would advise like don't eat more than two eggs. And I mean the whole egg, right? Like the yolk and the egg white. If you are someone who has good cholesterol or low cholesterol and you want to eat three, great. If you are someone who has high cholesterol and you want to eat three eggs at breakfast and then steak cooked in butter at lunch and then like a milkshake for dinner, I'd be like, okay, like
Oh yeah.
let's kind of, reevaluate how many animal products you're consuming. But saturated fat isn't terrible for you,
Okay.
right?
So
It's
that's
not,
where like the whole stigma of just like animal products
mhm,
alone happen to be high in saturated fat. So
yeah,
there's just this connotation that like you should just stay away from them because of that. So that's where that stigma comes from. But to your point,
right.
like it could be done in moderation.
Totally.
You have to understand your personal cholesterol levels and your personal kind of like diet and what your body reacts to. And
Yeah.
then from there you can ultimately make a decision, because you hear so much now too. Obviously, the whole vegan movement's big, vegetarian movement. I mean, there's
Yeah.
pescatarian, which I think
Mhm,
is a really good one,
mhm.
because you're still getting a good source of protein. What comes with the pescatarian diet, you have to watch mercury levels with
Mhm.
seafood, specifically tuna,
Yeah.
as one of those. But
Yeah.
like anything, you have to eat everything in moderation, and I think you kind of touched on it too. It's like having that variety in a
Mhm.
diet is very key, as long as you kind of stay in the foundation of eating very whole foods, and staying away from processed foods.
Yeah. And I think you also have to think like, okay, yeah, animal products, yes, they're higher in saturated fats, but they're also high in a lot of other things that are good for you. There's a
Yeah.
lot of vitamins in animal-based foods that are good for you. And this is coming from a former vegan. I was vegan for almost 4 years.
Oh
And I'm
wow.
telling you, like, it is okay. I eat animals now, and there's so many other things in eggs,
Mhm.
in dairy, in yogurt, in cheese. If you're, obviously buying the best quality of those products that you can, there's so much more than just the saturated fat parts. They're also giving you things that they're giving in them to you in amounts that really can't be found in other foods. So yes, be mindful of the saturated fats, but also just remember that they're giving you a lot of other positive things too.
Definitely.
So I would definitely recommend, like, if you go to the doctor and they tell you, you have to watch your cholesterol either because of family history or because of your diet, then okay, take a look back at just how many animal products you're consuming. But if your cholesterol is fine, like I promise you, you're probably
You're
not
not doing
overdoing
anything
it.
wrong.
Yeah,
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 got it.
exactly.
Okay. No, no, that's awesome. Really, really good insight. So kind of getting back into, a little bit of that connection to the overall part of our mental health, right?
Yeah.
How does a diet like this truly impact our mental health, right? Like what are some of the things that I guess eating a really good diet that's strong in nutrients, that's very whole in terms of vegetables and fruit, what is something that comes from the benefits of that for your overall mental health?
Yeah. So, each component of the foods that you eat are going to feed a different bacteria or microbe in your gut, right? So, the reason why that's important is that one, the diversity of your gut matters, and also your body's ability to absorb those nutrients, right? And when you are someone, I'm kind of going to go back to like the anxiety and the mind part of it.
Yeah.
If
Hmm.
you are someone, I've never met a person who has gut issues that also isn't struggling with anxiety or really stressed out or highly emotional and not able to process those emotions, right? So I've never met a
Yeah.
single person who struggles with their gut who's like, oh my God, anxiety? Never heard of her. Like they're
Yeah.
all
What is that?
struggling. Yeah. So the way that you eat those foods is really, really important because there's probably someone listening to this right now thinking, I already do all of that. I already eat sweet green all the time.
Right.
I already
Mhm.
eat chicken. I already work out. I already do all those things. Because your diet, again, isn't the only thing that impacts your gut. It's your sleep, it's the medicine you take, it's your stress levels. All of those things impact your
Of
gut and
course.
as a result, your mind, right? So if you're someone who's thinking, I already do all that, why do I still have gut issues? And I would then reflect on, well, is your body really absorbing all those nutrients? Because if you're eating it really quickly, barely chewing, eating when you're not hungry, eating past fullness, then you're not allowing for your gut to process those foods. And so it has no impact on your body. It has no impact on your microbes. Well, it has a negative impact. It doesn't
You're
have
right.
no impact, it impacts it negatively.
It doesn't have a
And
positive
so,
impact.
right. And so your microbes are just sending these signals to your brain and it's just off regulating your system. And you're not, and that connection is not working the way that it should be, right? You're not keeping it as a
Interesting.
positive connection. You're kind of making it a more negative connection.
So it's like
Um,
being very mindful on how you eat, right? It's like don't just
yeah.
stuff it down. Eat it slowly, enjoy it, be present. Kind of like what we talked about on the last conversation is like about being present while you're eating and really enjoying the food, right? Don't just eat and
Yeah.
try to
Don't just
stuff
like
it as
inhale
fast
it.
as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like, I'm kind of curious to hear what you think, but kind of like pop
Okay.
quiz question. How many times do you think an average person chews their food before swallowing?
Oh wow. So
There's
on
no
one
wrong
bite.
answers. You can,
No, yeah, I
in
know.
one bite,
I'm just
how
trying to
many
think
times?
about like myself. In one bite, how many times do they chew? I don't know, 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. The average person chews 3 to 5 times. Do you know how many times we should be chewing our food?
Oh God, like 10.
20, 20 to 30.
Holy crap!
So here's what's happening. Again,
So
this
how does
might
that
get
work?
set.
Like,
This might, it's insane when you start doing it. Um,
God, my
you're gonna
mind
think like, you're gonna
gonna
think
eat
this is
different.
ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously it depends on the food, right? Like you're not gonna chew your oatmeal the way that you chew a piece of steak.
right,
You don't
right, right.
chew smoothies, right? But okay, again, this is gonna sound like a science lesson, but
No, no, go for it.
think about like if you're working and you have like 5 minutes to eat and then you have to get back to the next thing, you're
Right.
stressed. Your stress impacts the way that you eat because you're going to eat really fast. You're going to think, I got to get this over with because I need to go back to work. Then your
Yeah.
body doesn't know how to process that food because here's what's happening when you eat your food really fast. One, when you don't chew enough times, so your saliva has enzymes that are essential for digestion. And when food is in your mouth and you're chewing, whether you realize it or not, like your mouth is like excreting saliva into the food to make it obviously easier to chew and to go
Of
down
course. Yeah.
your throat. When you're
Hmm.
only chewing 3 to 5 times, you're not giving your saliva enough time to release those enzymes into the food.
Wow.
Then
Dude,
your
that's crazy.
your teeth are responsible for chewing, right? Like
Right.
the chewing is your teeth's job. If you chew 3 to 4 times, your food's not being broken down all of the way. You should feel like your food is mush in your mouth before you send it to your stomach. When you send it to your stomach without being properly chewed, your stomach is now left to do a job that was for your teeth. And that's going to result in burping, right? The acid reflux, uh,
Yep.
the
That's
the
huge.
the
And I actually
bloating.
kind of want to touch up on that because that's
Yeah,
a lot of people suffer from acid reflux
yeah.
and heart.
And then like also people being bloated after they eat. When you feel bloated,
Yeah.
then you kind of feel like, oh, I wish I could lay down. It takes energy away from you. The point of eating
Hmm.
is to give you energy, so you shouldn't feel lethargic after you eat. Right? Like that's what calories are, right? Calories are energy. And so if you eat, you should feel energy, but it depends on how you're eating. And so you're sending that food to your stomach and it's not being properly broken down. And so it's just kind of like going through your system and your body's not really absorbing the nutrients properly. And so is it really doing anything for you? No, not really. So you have to think it doesn't matter how healthy the meal is if you're not
Yeah.
eating it properly. And then that's just one part. The whole other part is that you've heard of the central nervous system, right?
Yep.
Right? We have a whole other nervous system that rarely gets talked about, which is the autonomic nervous system. And that nervous system is what regulates like involuntary physiological like responses. So things like your heart rate,
Right.
your respiration,
Hmm.
your blood pressure, etc. Right? So think about when you're stressed, like your heart rate goes up, your
Hmm.
breath becomes more shallow, you're not breathing as deeply, you're breathing a lot faster, you might feel shortness of breath. Your body, I feel like I'm going to go off on like a 20-minute tangent. I'm not, but this is important.
Do your thing. Do your thing.
Okay. So stress is a survival mechanism. Stress is designed to keep you alive, right? Like
Yes.
if you see
Hmm.
a lion outside your window,
Exactly.
you're going to run because stress kicks in is like, get the hell away. You got to stay alive, right?
Yeah, stress was created to protect us.
Yeah.
What's happened is over time, and when stress was basically originated, it was when the cavemen were running away from the saber-toothed tiger that was going to kill them, and we've inherited that because we're part of the same genotype. We've inherited a lot of that, but our stresses are different. We're stressed about money. We're stressed about, security. We're stressed about our safety, things like
Yeah.
that. And it's all just different triggers that cause it. And if anything, there's more now because there's a lot more external triggers, I guess, out there. And it's about how do we choose to kind of live through that.
Yeah. I love that you already kind of like took us there because you're right. Like we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers.
Hmm.
We're stressed about, oh my God, I have this deadline. Oh my God, money. Oh my God, am I getting this traffic? Like little things are stressing us out. Our body doesn't know the difference between being stressed because a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you and being stressed because you're
It's
late
just there to
on a
protect
work
you.
deadline. So for
Hmm.
all your body knows, you sit down to eat and you're stressed because of a meeting you just had, and your body thinks that you are in a life-threatening situation,
Yeah.
even though you're not, right? But what happens is when those cavemen were running away from their saber-toothed tigers, their digestion, right? They were in a state of fight or flight. And I mentioned rest or digest in the last episode. They can't be on at the same time. You're either in fight or flight or you're in
Mm.
rest and digest. So if you're running away from a tiger, your digestion shuts down so that it can send all of your energy to your limbs and to your brain so that you can run fast and think quick. So you
Wow.
sit down to eat and you're stressed out about work and your digestion is off because you're stressed out.
Right.
Your stress response is on. Your digestive system is not working. The things
Wow.
that happen to your stomach when you're eating and you're stressed, when your digestion's not working, but you're sending food there anyway. So your
Yeah.
body stores it away as fat. They're like, we'll deal with you later. We're trying to survive here. And then you're not absorbing nutrients. You're not like digesting foods properly. You're not excreting them from your body properly. And what does this result in? Changed microbes, sorry, in a microbiome. And what is that doing? Sending signals to your brain. And what is that doing? Keeping you in just a complete state where your body is not functioning the way it should be. Going back
Mm.
to that vicious cycle, which is why the way that you eat is so important.
Holy shit, I'm mind blown right now.
Yeah.
I'm here looking at the notes that you had put together before. So I guess that kind of goes into like how the gut is the second brain, because it's directly correlated with just sensing that your body is stressed. So it's now firing a signal back to the brain saying like, "Hey, I can't take this down. I got to protect you right now. This food's not a priority, even though nothing really crazy is going on. It's just
Yeah.
not a priority right now, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be stored there, and then that turns into fat, and then it's not being broken down, and then that's why people, I guess, gain weight, and that's why they say stress. Stress kills, stress gains weight, and it can
Yeah.
not only kill you mentally, but it's literally killing you physically. And part of the reason of that physical breakdown of the body is because your body's just not processing anything because it can't.
Yeah. And I mean, I would even say that like it shouldn't be our second brain. Not that our actual brain isn't like super important.
Yeah,
I
who
mean,
needs
without
the
it,
brain?
we wouldn't be talking. But I
Yeah,
would say that it's just as important, right? It's almost like I wouldn't put it in like second place. I'd be like 1A and 1B,
it's exactly 1A, 1B. Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because the second brain, like this whole term of your brain, your gut being a brain within itself was, I mean, a concept that was discovered like way after we like extensively studied the brain in our mind or in our head. Um, and then I think another way that I would kind of explain just how important your gut is, again, like the way that I would explain it to like a kindergartner is your face expresses all of your emotions, right? When you're surprised, your eyebrows go up, your mouth drops. When you're happy, you smile. When you're sad, you frown.
Yeah.
Your gut does the same thing. Your gut has an expression for every single emotion. Your gut is a mirror image of what's going on in your brain.
Wow.
That's how connected they are.
Yeah.
Anything that you feel, anger, sadness, happiness, shock,
Yeah. No,
it's
it's true. I
all,
mean, and it goes kind of like back to what I was saying earlier about the meditation, where I definitely because when you said that there's a connection, I've always noticed that when I'm in a deep meditation, a lot of my sensations come around the gut. Obviously
yeah,
sometimes a little bit in the neck and in the shoulders, and I think that we spoke on it a little bit on the last one. It's like how we have like different trigger points and different areas where we hold certain emotions.
yeah,
Um, what are some of those emotions that we do carry? And is there a way of kind of releasing that, right? Because sometimes we may, kind of to your point, we might be eating everything correctly, we might be exercising, but we're holding maybe some sort of past trauma, maybe, or we're maybe holding something from today that's just kind of like bothering us. And sometimes it takes a level of awareness to even notice that, right? Because you go through your day, you don't even notice, you're so distracted in your head. But the moment you kind of get in there and you're like, okay, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, I know these emotions are not me, but they're still prevalent, and I'm really feeling it here in my abdomen, or I'm really feeling it here in my lower stomach. What exactly is going on there from like that emotional that emotion to, I guess, gut connection.
yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I would say that the two other things that are really important other than diet
Yeah.
are breathing and meditating. If you are someone who has gut issues, you should be meditating.
Okay.
And we did touch on this a little bit in our yoga, and it's interesting
Yeah.
because I focused a lot in my master's on this whole gut mind connection. Like I really honed in on this. Like if you can't tell, fires me up. And I studied a lot about how people who struggle with digestion should be doing yoga. And again, you feel everything in your gut, right? When you feel nervous, when you feel excited, you feel it there. But if you don't acknowledge them, they then stay living there. And then they can often kind of like hide in these certain places in your gut.
Yeah.
Which is why I mentioned in the yoga episode where there's a pose. So I guess what like is commonly known as butterfly pose, when you put the bottoms of your feet together and open
Mm.
up your hips and you kind of lean forward. That's a
Okay.
stretch for your hips, but it's more than that, a release of emotions, experiences, and traumas. Because any experience
I
you've
see.
ever had, any trauma you've ever had, any anxiety and stress that you feel when it goes undealt with stays there. And
Yeah.
so it's not uncommon for someone to sit and meditate and they're trying to find stillness, to then all of a sudden feel things in their stomach because things can come up in moments of stillness, right? When your body is still, normally that's when your mind starts to race. And vice versa. Usually, when your body is moving, is when you can still your mind. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of meditation. The goal is to find both stillness
Yeah.
in the body and stillness in the mind. So like you said, like it's not unusual for you to feel those things when you are meditating. And the benefit of the breathing that I mentioned and the meditation, is that you're sending your body into a state of rest and digest. So the ways that I would put this into practice
Makes
are one, when you're and like really like breathing into your diaphragm, like letting your belly like get big when you breathe. Like
right.
a lot of us kind of breathe
Like
only really
focusing
in.
that attention into your that attention of breath into the stomach area, right? Because
Yes.
sometimes like we breathe, like sometimes we breathe into our shoulders, maybe we breathe
Yeah.
into the
To the
back,
chest. Yeah.
right?
This is
Into the
like the
chest.
way that I like to imagine it is like when you're starting to breathe deeply in a meditation, or you should kind of do this, especially if you're stressed before you eat, because that kind of tricks your body out of the stress response and into
You're in a rest.
rest and digest. Yeah, because if you're stressed out, you're not going to be breathing deeply. When you're stressed, you start to. So if
Hmm.
you're breathing deeply, your body's going to think, oh, I'm breathing like a relaxed person, so I must be relaxed, and that's going to turn on digestion. But the way that I like to think of it is send like when you're breathing and you send your breath to your belly, like really like let it puff out, you know? And I like to imagine that my breath is massaging my organs. That kind of helps me like
I like that.
really breathe into the belly. Like it's a little, a little massage for my organs and it feels good. Um,
Yeah.
Especially because sometimes when we breathe into the chest and only into the lungs, that can also sometimes induce more feelings of anxiety. And the more you can send it to the belly, it really is going to help relax you. Um, and so the benefit of the breathing is, like I said, like it's tricking your body into a state of rest and digest. So if you sit down to eat and like I always encourage, take a moment, like figure out what it is that you're feeling. I give this thing to clients that I actually have right here because I've been using it myself that says like mood before my meal, right? So it forces me to check in and be like, am I stressed? Am I angry?
Cool.
Because if I am, I should take 10 really deep breaths to calm my body before I eat. And then I would always
Very
recommend
interesting.
meditating first thing in the morning if you can, because that's going to set the tone for how you approach your day. The more that you can meditate and get in this practice of breathing, of stillness, of mindfulness, the more likely you are to approach your day that way, right? You can't control what's going to happen in your day. Something
Mm.
really annoying could happen at work, but you can control how you respond to it. And if you can
Yes.
respond to it in a less stressed way, and like, I don't want to sound too preachy because I want everyone to know that's listening to this that
Breathe.
I struggle. I struggle with this so much. I
Yeah.
respond to a lot of things in a very stressed out way. And I'm not doing any favor to my body when I do that. But I try
Yeah.
to be as conscious as I can.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to say. You have a level of awareness that you can at least acknowledge that you do have that. And the reason you practice this is because you don't want to constantly act in a place of stress, but in a place of rest. Right.
Yeah.
So, that takes a level of awareness to even get there. Right. Because some people just live their whole life and don't even realize that they have that problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like,
And I
a,
maybe and I don't want to use the word problem, either. I don't think it is a problem, but it's I don't know what the right word is, but it is not a problem. It's just something
right.
that we all learn to kind of live with.
Right. It's like you don't mean it in a negative way, but it's something that we
Yeah,
definitely like deal with in a certain
yeah,
way. And it's funny because every single client that I work with is always shocked at how much meditation I have them do. They're like, I thought you were going to tell me what to eat. And I'm like, no, I'm actually going to help you.
What?
I'm gonna help you like chill the fuck out so that your gut can handle the foods that you eat. And so that then you're less anxious because of how powerful it is. And it's like there really is this huge aha moment for everyone when they realize just how important the dealing with anxiety and dealing with stress and really putting an effort into relaxing is when it comes to being healthier. Because
Yeah.
I always say this, the root of every single illness, gut issue, or not even gut issue, just like issue in the body can all be traced back to the gut. Everything. Inflammation, traced back to the gut. There's a bunch of different gut diseases. And I bet you someone listening to this has gone to a gastroenterologist and their gastroenterologist has told them, oh, you just have IBS. And if you Google
Yeah. Oh my
IBS,
God.
the first thing
Yeah.
it will say is this is a disease that has no known cause. All it does is treat the symptoms.
I mean, and the little because IBS is very common. The little that I've read on it, a lot of it is actually linked to stress. Like they say
Yeah,
that you might have it because you're just stressed out.
yeah. Or because you have gone through a traumatic event that maybe you
Right.
haven't fully healed from, or
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of people that struggle with body image will also experience it because they're very anxious about their appearance or they're very anxious about food itself. So again, it really is just kind of like this vicious cycle, but it kind of all comes down to just being more mindful about how you take care of yourself as a whole and
Hmm.
dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress. Again, I think that's another added benefit of doing yoga is that is a form of movement because exercise also positively impacts your gut bacteria,
Definitely.
which and then impacts your brain positively.
Mhm.
But the benefit of yoga is that you're moving your body, you're breathing deeply, and you're connecting your mind and your body in a way where you're fully present, which is going to leave you feeling like, more calm. And
Yeah.
so, like, there's a lot of studies that say, like, if you're someone that has IBS, do yoga. And that's because of the
Yeah.
breathing and the mindfulness.
No, it's true. I mean, I'm just here like thinking it's like, inflammation, gut issues, headaches. I mean, there's so many different like things that everyday people deal with on a regular basis and it has becomes pretty chronic that ultimately kind of ties back down to it's like I think the first question you got to ask yourself, are you doing everything in your power to, wind down at night, relax, let go of the phone a little bit, go outside and
Yeah.
exercise, maybe stretch and do a little bit of yoga, whether it's just 20 minutes, just little things to really hone in and focus on the reduction of stress, letting emotions go, letting thoughts go, really just, letting go is really what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
Release. Yeah.
Mhm. A
And,
release, exactly. And the
and
more
I
you do
love,
that, you could see a lot of those kind of problems kind of maybe go away.
yeah. You see how like connected everything is. And you said something about like putting your phone down. Again, I'm not claiming to be perfect at this, but something that really changed my relationship to my phone, especially in the morning,
Hmm.
which I'm pretty good about leaving it outside of my room in general at night. I don't bring it
Nice.
into the bedroom at night. It was Jay Shetty who said this. If you haven't heard of him,
Yeah.
definitely check him out. He wrote this book called Think Like a Monk, and he said when you open up your phone in the morning, you're usually like bombarded by notifications, text messages. Yes, you have it.
I
It's
have.
have
Yeah,
you read
it's
it
a
yet?
great book. I have. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's great. I actually just gave it to my cousin for Christmas because I feel like it's an
Nice.
amazing book, and he's I just think he's a wonderful person to learn from
Hmm.
and to listen to. But he said, imagine every single notification on your phone and everything that you see in your phone in the morning, instead of it being a notification on your phone, was an actual person that walked into your room in the morning, right? So imagine that you wake up and you have 10 text messages
It's
and
the
you have
equivalent of like New York City subway in your bedroom, basically.
exactly. How stressful would that be if you opened up your
Yeah.
eyes and the first thing you saw was 20 people being like, "Hey, I like that photo." or like vocalizing to you what the actual text message
Or
is.
negative. It's like you see a video and it's people fighting, and it's like imagine all that in your room.
Exactly. It would be extremely stressful. And he was
Yeah,
saying that just because it's on your phone doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same impact on you. It's equally it's increasing your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and it's causing you to start your day in a state of stress.
so true.
And so when I read that, I was like, okay, I'm making a change. And like now, first thing in the morning, um, I'm like, I'm going to journal and I'm going to meditate, and then I'll go to my phone because then I'll be able to handle it better. But like, how insane
Yeah.
is that that we live in a world where we open up our eyes and the first thing we do is check our phones? It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean, it's the modern day newspaper. You know,
Yeah,
it's not like this never existed. You know, there was
that's
some
true.
sort of stimulant before where people woke up and the first thing they did was open the newspaper or maybe turn on the news. You know, on the
Yeah.
TV. And it's kind of that same effect. Now it's just easier, so it has more of an impact, and it's just harder and harder, and we have to adapt. You know, as just human beings, we have to adapt to our environment to put ourselves in a situation that's going to make us feel good and ultimately live a better life. And that ultimately does mean staying away from the phone in the morning. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And also the news, I'll say, like,
Yeah, 100%.
not telling you to not be informed, but I used to listen to a podcast called The Daily. It's like a New York Times
Hmm.
podcast, and it was
Yeah,
always like the top story, and it's usually like war,
the sky is
COVID, like
falling.
yeah,
Mhm.
like the world is over. And I would listen to it as soon
Yeah,
as I woke up, and I was like, I gotta stop doing that.
yeah.
It makes me sad. But you're right. It's always existed, but it's way more accessible to us now
Mhm.
because of the fact that it's
Exactly.
all in one little device that can conveniently sit on our nightstand while we sleep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, So before we kind of wrap up here,
Mhm.
one of the things that I actually wanted to ask you, just because a lot of us do this, is
Uh-huh.
what is the influence on caffeine and what is the influence on alcohol to our gut and our mental health?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Let's start with caffeine. Everyone's different. I'll start by
Hmm.
saying that. Some people handle coffee on their stomachs no problem. I'm someone who kind of stopped drinking coffee on a regular basis because it was having a negative impact on my gut. One of the worst things that you can do for the gut mind connection is drink coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. So, because
I gotta
caffeine
stop doing that.
caffeine increases when you're drinking coffee on an empty stomach, you're increasing cortisol levels first thing in the morning. So you're starting your day in a state of stress. So I'm not saying don't drink coffee by any means. I
Right.
think everyone does handle it differently. I can even tell you that, um, like I don't drink it every day anymore. So for me, it's become like a Friday treat. On Fridays, I'll go and I'll work outside of my house. I'll go to a coffee shop, and so I'll order a
Do you have an
coffee.
alternative to coffee in the mornings?
Yes,
Like, are you drinking something else?
yes. So I'm drinking. So there's a few things that I like to alternate with. One is mushroom coffee. So it's like a coffee alternative made out of mushroom.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because there's a brand that I saw that they're doing that. And it's becoming more and more, I guess, common.
Yeah, definitely. And I love it. There's also a
Mushroom.
version of it that's like mushrooms and coffee. So it does have coffee in it, but the mushrooms take the negative effects of caffeine away.
Okay.
Um, then there's two other things. One of them is this, there's a brand called Mesa Luna. It's an
Yes.
Ecuadorian based company, but they ship in the US. And it is a
Okay.
blend. It's what I'm drinking right now. That's why I'm holding my mug. It's a blend of cacao, which is great for
Hmm.
brain function, reishi, which is a mushroom, this plant called sacha inchi, which has protein, and it's good for your digestion. And then
Interesting.
turmeric, which is anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
I blend it with almond milk. It tastes like drinking a hot chocolate.
And can those type of beverages, can you drink that on an empty stomach?
Yeah,
Okay.
I try not to, and anyway, just because I find that filling my stomach with a sort of beverage messes with my hunger cues. But as far as cortisol goes,
Yeah.
it's not affecting your
It's not
cortisol, which is your
affecting it.
right. And then
Got
there's
it.
another thing that I don't know, anyone who's really interested in brain health and mental health should follow this guy named Dr. Amen. It's spelled like amen, like if you were praying,
Okay.
but it's amen. And he makes this raw cacao, so like unsweetened raw cacao, almond milk, and then apparently stevia makes chocolate flavored stevia drops. And he does a few dropfuls of those.
Hmm.
And the cacao is really good for like the brain flow in your brain flow, the blood
Interesting.
flow in your brain.
Yeah, I
So
got
those are some of the things that you could swap out for coffee.
you. Okay. Interesting.
Again, not everyone responds to coffee negatively. I think that coffee gives us a false sense of energy. You don't
Yeah.
need it to have energy, but coffee also does taste really good. And if you enjoy it, you should
Hmm.
continue to. But
Hmm.
definitely be mindful of not drinking it on an empty stomach. And I would suggest that if you want to get better sleep, to not drink it like after noon, like after 12 o'clock noon.
Yeah,
Because
definitely. I've
again,
definitely
sleep
seen that
impacts your
effects.
gut. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be someone who like drank espresso after dinner.
I don't
Like,
know how people do that. That I never did. Unless I knew. I mean, yeah, and I guess it's a good segue, but like espresso martinis, like I have
the
one at night,
alcohol.
and yeah, and I'm sleep. What is that? Like I
Yeah, I
just close
know.
my eyes, but I'm awake.
Well, I mean, that's like double whammy because you're caffeine and alcohol in one.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
here's the thing. Listen, if you're really working on healing your gut, in the process of healing it, is drinking alcohol the best thing for you? No. Once your gut is healed, it's fine. It also depends on what you're drinking, like if you're drinking like really
Yeah,
sugary things,
of
no.
course.
But like drinking like a wine or if you're drinking it like in a way where it's maybe just like with lime or ice, things like that, it's not going to be
Mm.
terrible for you. But in the process of healing your gut, it's not going to do you much good. Um, I know again, like that is kind of a frustrating thing to hear because I think that that's like the one thing that people are like, don't tell me not to drink.
Yeah. No,
But yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
there's no
I
denying
study a
it.
lot of people, and I try to understand their behaviors. And some people go no alcohol, and they've chosen to take that path. And more power to them. I think
Yeah,
it's admirable, and it's hard. I
totally.
don't know if I will be able to do that, just because I love socializing, and part of that socializing, and I know no one needs alcohol to socialize, but it's something I enjoy. I there's nothing like me and my friends, and we're out there having a glass of wine, enjoying a nice dinner, and we're all there just having a good time. Like those are moments that I generally enjoy, but it's not like I'm there getting hammered drinking 7 bottles of wine on
Right.
an everyday basis. It's like I have a glass or two, we had a good time, feel
Uh-huh.
nice, and we enjoy, and I feel great the next day, right? But yeah, it's like how we were talking about the food. Everything I think has to be in moderation. Everything
Yeah.
should be done in the right manner, and I think that maybe it is healthy to, like you said, kind of get to your gut to a healthy place. That maybe you take little cleanse breaks every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Where you go a week or two without alcohol, or whatever that a month, whatever that looks like. Because we just need sometimes that recalibration, and I think that's one way to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and there's always going to be certain triggers for your gut, whether it's dairy, gluten, alcohol, caffeine. And so I think it's just being mindful of like if on a certain day you feel that your gut is a little bit more inflamed than on the other day, then I would ask yourself like, can I go to
Yeah.
this dinner and order like a mocktail off the menu
Hmm.
instead of the cocktail? And just being mindful of that because again, I think that that's like a whole separate conversation of like the
Yeah.
giving it up or the not giving it up. But there's no denying just that alcohol has
An
inflammatory
effect.
triggers, the effect that it has on your sleep, which then impacts your gut, which then impacts your stress levels. Like all of
Definitely.
that, obviously, there's no denying it. But yeah, could you give it up for a week or two and see if your gut symptoms subside and then make the choice to go back into it, starting light, maybe with like a wine instead of a beer or like
Yeah.
tequila on the rocks with ice instead of like the espresso martini, just kind of making those mindful choices, even within the
100%.
choice to consume it, I think is important. It all just comes down to understanding your body and how it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
Mhm.
Um, cool. I think that's it in terms of questions.
Yeah.
I'm very curious, to see the feedback, and see what type of questions we get from this.
Yeah.
Because then I think it could be cool to do like maybe like a little Q&A before every single one of the episodes. So it's like, hey, one of these came out, I had a question actually about this. And, we can maybe take the first 10, 15 minutes of every conversation to answer any additional questions that maybe we didn't touch on, or get a little bit deeper into some of the things that we mentioned. So
Hmm.
if you guys have any questions, obviously let us know, either one of us, and we'll be more than happy to try and answer those questions. More her than me, but um, but even from experience, like trying to speak through experience, try to make it as relatable as possible, as everyday people. Like we all have our vices, we all have our things that we could work on. So happy to kind of figure out where we can help and where we can provide some clarity. So definitely shoot away any questions that you guys have.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to hear. I know this was like a boatload of information, and so
It
hopefully
was.
you don't leave feeling more overwhelmed. I think the only thing that I would leave you with is like
Mhm.
prioritize your plans, breathe deeply before you eat, and find time
Yeah.
to meditate. And
Yeah.
any questions that you may have that I didn't answer, or even that Andre didn't answer, please let us know,
Yeah,
so we can look
you
further.
don't want to make it more complicated. I mean, I
Yeah,
think, you did a great job of educating everyone. At least I feel like I gained a crap load of wisdom today.
that's great.
Um, yeah. So, I think it's, making the right decisions, being very conscious about the food choices that you make and how you're actually eating, like you mentioned, and not
Mhm.
trying to make it more than it needs to be. Just give your body what it needs and take the time to stay tranquilo, you know?
Yeah, a great way to finish.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, if you guys have any questions, definitely shoot it our way. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.